それをもって、評議会、理事会にお諮りをいただきまして、正式に理事に推挙し、会長という流れになっていくというご報告をいただきました。一連の手続きの中で、透明性を持って選ばれていくという流れを聞かせていただきまして、多くの方から会長職にということをお話をいただきました。大変悩んだ結果でありますけれども、国務大臣
who desired to designate me as a member of the Executive Board of Tokyo 2020, I decided to accept desired offer to designate me as a member of the Executive Board of Tokyo 2020. I decided to accept the Executive Board and the Council that was Tokyo 2020, and I was reported by that the Executive Board and was going to be officially named as an Executive Board 2020 member of Tokyo 2020 with the transparency that this procedure and going to be officially named as an Executive Board member of Tokyo 2020 with the transparency. A large number of procedure and process were applied as I was to accept this position, and many the president of Tokyo 2020 It was not an easy decision for me to make, but this today, the president of Tokyo 2020, I wish it was not an easy decision for me to make, but as minister today, I submitted my wish of resigning from as minister position as minister to Olympic and Paralympic Games, as well as minister in charge of women's empowerment and minister of state and minister of Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games, as well as minister in charge of women's empowerment and minister of state and ministerial position. It was really not easy. I wanted to fulfill my mission completely in order to implement my ministerial position because as a minister, I wanted to fulfill my mission completely in order to implement successfully and the Tokyo Games as a minister. 2020 and IOC, however, with the TMG, in order to support all of them, by becoming the president of Tokyo 2020, even if I change the position, then I will be becoming the president of Tokyo 2020. So in order to, even if I change the position, and I will be cooperating with all of them myself. So in order to important policy and this offer to become the president of Tokyo 2020, and that is how I made this decision. Important for me to accept this offer to become the president of Tokyo 2020, and that is how I made this decision.
Next, Imai-san of NHK, please. Imai speaking. I'm from NHK. About the Tokyo Games. Imai speaking. I'm from NHK. The gender-related issue was raised in conjunction with the selection of new president. In fact, this was referred to by President in conjunction with the board meeting. The selection of new president. I'd like to ask more specifically how gender element is going to be represented the board meeting in the organizing committee. And I'd like to ask more specifically how gender element is going to be represented in the organizing committee. And because of the importance of the gender, President Hashimoto, for your own behavior, there was some criticism made action, behavior, sexual harassment 7 years ago, harassment, and therefore some criticized that you are not qualified behavior to be president. What is the reaction to such a sexual harassment or power harassment, and therefore some criticized that you are not qualified to be president? What is the reaction to such a criticism? First of all, looking at the series of developments that we have seen recently, and first of all, it culminated as myself being selected as a president, and I believe we need to take immediate actions. It culminated as I'd like to myself identify new direction as a president, and I believe we need to take immediate actions. That is, within the percent being the female representation in the organizing committee, diversity and orientation and visualization. That is 40% being the female representation in the organizing committee, task force, diversity and harmony. And that's what I'd like to be emphasized by way of advocate introducing an IPC. And that's what I'd like to, so that we can advocate reform that would be an IPC understood and supported by those people concerned. That's the kind of action that has to be immediately implemented and supported by those people concerned. That's a kind of action that has to be immediately implemented. Regrettable. And also, I feel deeply about my regrettable action that I took. I am deeply 7 years ago. Regrettable. I feel deeply back then regrettable, and as well as today that I took. I am still 7 years ago upon myself as to what I have done back then. And as well as today, I'm trying to face reflecting upon myself as to what I have done, as well as how it has evolved into. In fulfilling my mission to face the diversity, what I have done, as well as how it has evolved into challenges. In fulfilling my mission as the president by way of philosophy of Olympism, gender equality, and other challenges. Those are the philosophies of the Olympic Games, and that's why I like to philosophy of Olympism. And those philosophies of the Olympic Games, and that's leading to support and understanding by the people. I know there is such a harsh criticism leading to support and understanding by the people. I know there is such a harsh criticism. I have to renew my determination to consider the standing of this, respond to them one by one. Tokyo Games. I have to renew my determination to consider the standing demonstrated to the rest of the Tokyo Games through Tokyo Games. The gender equality I'm here with a strong determination and I'm to the rest of the world through Tokyo myself to the solution with a strong determination, and I'm determined to dedicate myself to the solution to those challenges.
Saito from Asahi newspaper, thank you very much. So you are now appointed as the president of Tokyo 2020. Your predecessor, Mr. Mori, is also your senior colleague as the president of Tokyo 2020. Your predecessor, Mr. Mori, is also your senior after the decision of accepting politician appointment. Did you have any opportunity to speak with Mr. Mori after your decision of accepting this appointment? Mr. Mori is my political mentor as well. So Mr. Mori is someone who is really special for me. My political mentor as well. So Mr. Mori is someone who is really special for me. Recently, Mr. Mori withdrew his statement and he expressed his apologies and he felt Mr. Mori withdrew his statement and he expressed his apologies and he felt deeply and I myself all of that and decided to resign. I really have to make all the efforts to improve the situation and I myself and early next week feel that I really have to make all the efforts to improve the situation and to me as a new president and early next week for Mr. Modi, we would like to have a transition and succession process. To me, as for many years of Tokyo 2020, we would like to have a transition and succession process. For many years, World Cup and for all the sports and World Rugby, Mr. Mori made a tremendous contribution. Football, so his experiences and all the sports and athlete communities, Mr. Mori made a tremendous contribution. Given them, I believe that there will be situations where I need his advices. So, given them, many years, he believes that there will be situations where I need his advices. So over many years, he has accumulated his own track record by myself so that it can help me as part of my power to positively received by myself so that it can help me as part of my power to make sorting out all of the issues President of Tokyo 2020 by doing so. Thank you very much. And then I will be really sorting out all of the issues by doing so. Thank you very much.
Shimbun newspaper. Ms. Hashimoto, the President Hashimoto. You said you decided to step down as a minister. Ms. Hashimoto, the President Hashimoto. You said whether you also intend to step down as a minister from LDP, or what about status as the MP? Also intend to separate yourself from LDP, or what about status as the government as a minister? MP? the member of the parliament, one can see that be part of the government as a minister. You might be just dependent upon whatever is instructed by the government. As a new president, the relationship between the sports and the politics dependent upon, and I'm sure you have a lot of by the government. That is the relationship between the sports sort of relationship and the politics and the government trying to achieve. And I'm sure you have a lot of the government and politics. What sort of relationship whether it is trying to achieve Olympic Games when it comes to government, sports, politics, and policy point of view, regardless of whether it is by way of Olympic or Paralympic Games, when it comes to sports, the members of the parliament and politicians were by way of the super party success of those events. The members of the parliament and politicians, according to IOC, consolidated as well as national government, success of those events. They consider that I can stay as the member of the parliament, according to IOC, as the president as well as national government. What I have to do is I can still demonstrate I can do the parliament so that serving as a president, and therefore suspicion or question. What I have to do is to demonstrate I can do that so that in my capacity won't be any suspicion or question about that. I used to be the minister in charge of the Tokyo Games, and from that point of view, I have been working together with the minister in charge of the Tokyo Games. That's what, from that point of view, I have been working together with the organizing committee as well as IOC and IPC. When it comes to sports, that's what I have experienced up until today. For organizing committee, I was in the position of supporting their activities, what the government should do, what the local government should do. For organizing committee, I was in the position of supporting their activities, what the government should do. They have different roles to play, although there is a need for coordination. So it is not organizing committee should be just they have different roles to play, following the direction of the government. Coordination. In the capacity as the president of the organizing committee, I think I understand the direction of the government, and therefore, that in the capacity as the president of the organizing committee, I think I understand do my best to do, and therefore, the demonstrating what we should do in that capacity.
Thank you.
Do my best in the demonstrating what we should do in that capacity.
Please. Thank you very much. Fujiwara from TV Asahi. My question goes to President Hashimoto. Thank you very much. Fujiwara from TV Asahi. You said that you are going to make efforts to promote gender equality. What is your understanding of the current status of you said that you are going to make the efforts to promote gender equality. What is your understanding of the current status of gender equality or not in Japan? Do you think genders are equal currently in Japan or not? A while moment ago, that particular question, I was in charge of myself until a while gender equality as well as women's empowerment. I was in charge of the ministers, and last year I was part of the gender equality as well as gender equality basic plan as the ministers, and last year I was part of the creation of the Japan gender equality basic plan index. Japan ranks 121. Japan is very low in terms of gender gap index. Japan, I am aware of 21 issue. First position is very low. It requires unfortunate, and then I am aware very important issue. What Tokyo 2020 requires as organizing committee does about the gender equality, very important. First, it is very important. First and foremost, I think as organizing committee does about the essential for Tokyo 2020 itself. First, it is very important. First and foremost, I think it and very important that the essential for Tokyo has a lot of communication capabilities and messaging power toward other organizations and stakeholders. I think Tokyo 2020 has a lot of communication capabilities and messaging power diversity which are part of the organizations and stakeholders. So this fundamental philosophy and for diversity which are part of the Olympics and Paralympics for the national government of Japan, fundamental philosophies, and through cooperation with the sports organizations and other for the national government of Japan, including government and local government. I think it will be essential for the organizations and other to deliver, including government and local government. I think it will be essential for the Tokyo 2020 to deliver concrete results in terms of gender equality.
Kyoto. Well, there are only 150 days or so before they're scheduled their opening of their Tokyo Games. 150 days or so before 3,500 members of the organizing committee opening of their. When the time is running short, you have to presently there are 3,500 members within the organization. When the time is running short, you have to be at the top in leading such a big organization. Anything that is unique to you. Would you like to? It is a huge organization. Do in leading such a big organization. The size of this anything organization unique to you. First and foremost, I know it is a huge organization. Pandemic is something that I like to work together with the national government the size of Tokyo metropolitan government. And first and foremost, the COVID pandemic is something that I like to work together with the national government and Tokyo metropolitan government, and therefore together with the sports federations as well as local municipalities. Bring an end to I would say this is something that we have to confront, therefore, together with the sports federations as well as local municipalities for the success. I would say this is something that we have to confront as united as one. Therefore, to that end, for the success of various organizations, the Tokyo Games within the organizing committee. And therefore, to that end, we need to once again there are various organizations review the function the organizing organization. We need to once again try to improve review the board communication and different organizations together with IOC and IPC. And try to improve our first experience in the board communication and the games. Together with IOC and IPC, what is given actually happening? Our first experience and postponing. What can we do in the games to successfully organize the Tokyo Games? What is actually happening? The people would be rest assured that this is going to be safe and successful Tokyo Games, so that the people would be rest assured that this is going to be safe and successful COVID Games. Therefore, to that end, they get understanding come up with the measures against the public, COVID, and also various suggestions, proposals, there's visions understanding from the public, and also various to announce. Suggestions, proposals, as visions to IOC and APC.
Thank you very much.
Something that I'd like to announce.
Television. Thank you. Thank you very much. On the topic of gender equality, I would like to ask you a question from TBS television regarding Mr. Mori's statement. On the topic of gender equality, I would like to ask you a question. People signed a petition regarding Mr. Mori's statement. And more than 150,000 people you yourself signed a petition that you would like to proactively address this issue. And I know that you yourself said that you would like to proactively address this issue about the gender equality. But another question is, what about the training? Know that they are training members of the staff members of the Tokyo 2020 about the gender equality. But another question is, what about the training for the executive about the gender members of the Tokyo 2020? So what's your ideas and thinkings about the reform from the Tokyo 2020 about the gender equality? So these type of problem needs to be resolved. So we would like to be close to the thinkings of outside. A large number of people who signed the petition. This is my opinion. So we would like to be close to the thinkings of us to understand what will be recognized by them as a success in terms of the gender equality reform. For us to understand what will be recognized by them we will be visible enough in terms of the gender equality and clear results. And otherwise it will not be a true reform in my opinion. We will be visible enough, including organizational concrete and clear results. We would like to take will not be a true reform in my opinion. Appropriate action, organizational reform, we would like to take as 2020 petitions. Appropriate action so that we'll be responding to the feelings and the mind of those who signed the petitions.
About remarks made by former President Mr. Mori, he retracted that remark, but then when he announced his resignation, he also mentioned that this was due to the misunderstanding remark, but then the difference in interpretation announced his resignation, I had also mentioned that this was due to the misunderstanding, the difference in problem associated with his remarks. I had the impression that he didn't understand fully problematic remarks. What was the problem associated with his remarks? You mentioned that this is considered as a diversity and harmony, the main theme of the Tokyo Games. What was the problem? And how you can regain the trust towards diversity and harmony, the main theme of the Tokyo Games? I'm sure you have identified challenges. If you come up with any concrete ideas as to what has to be changed in what way, I'm sure you have identified challenges. As one possible measure, if you come up with any concrete ideas as to what has to be changed in what way, for instance, as one possible measures, the proportion of the women board members to 40%. For instance, I believe that shouldn't be just the proportion type of the women board members to 40%. It is not just about the proportion. In fact, I believe that shouldn't be just the proforma type of something that their change is important. It is not just about the proportion. In fact, this is something that we're going to steadily implement. Is important to be understood. My mentor, Mr. Murray, therefore, in the political role, this is something that we're going to steadily implement. My mentor, Mr. Murray, I mentioned clearly that that was indeed inappropriate remarks. And then Mr. Murray also reflected upon himself. I mentioned clearly that that was indeed inappropriate remarks. I feel that Mr. Murray also reflected upon himself. Continue efforts based upon that the reflection. I feel that we have to such remarks. And in fact, this is not just limited to Mr. Murray. Efforts based upon that the reflection. Why is that he came up with such remarks? And in fact, this is not just limited to Mr. Murray. We have to what is the background of such remarks? Each different incident or issue, and then try to not fully convincing to those people what is the background of such remarks. Because this is something that is to prevent the recurrence, not fully convincing to those we need to take signed the petition. To prevent the recurrence, has to be translated into concrete actions.
Thank you very much.
I believe that has to be translated into concrete actions.
Sasaki-san from Sankei. Many opinion polls have a majority of the respondents said that the cancellation of the games cannot be avoidable. Opinion polls. So what is your idea about a majority of the respondents said that the cancellation of the games cannot be avoidable? So what is your idea about this type of and then even if I am now taking a different position, my thoughts remain unchanged. Last year, and then even if I am now taking a different position, it was decided that this unchanged will happen this year, this summer. The IOC have General Assembly, and it was decided that these games will happen this year, this summer, due to the pandemic situation as of now. And I know that many people are countermeasures and actions now due to the pandemic situation as of now. And I understand that many people are countermeasures and actions said that it is not going to be taken good enough to I understand that many people are still worried and said that it is now the approval rate for the games implementation is low, reflecting that the approval rate for the games implementation is low, reflecting and concurrently with the countermeasures against the pandemic, there are natural disaster issues and also and concurrently with the countermeasures and the pandemic, there are natural disaster issues and also inclusion and diversity, sustainability issues and elderly persons with challenges facing the world currently. Inclusion and diversity, and including all of them, there are a lot of challenges facing the world currently. I believe Japan, and through these Tokyo Games challenges, needs to facing us come up with a clear messages and actions as to what needs to be done to tackle these challenges. I think this needs to be done clear messages and actions as to what needs to be done about the implementation of challenges. So clearly, this needs to be done, otherwise we will not be able to secure understanding about the implementation of the games. So clearly, safety and peace of mind, we are going to make our utmost of in preparation through cooperation with the national government and Tokyo Metropolitan Government. We are going to make our utmost of in preparation through cooperation with the national government and Tokyo Metropolitan Government.
What do you think is the message that you can convey to the public about the significance of the Games? Olympian, What do you think? Well, in fact, this is not limited to the message that you can convey to the public about the significance of the Olympic Games and sports events at large. This is not limited to in general the Tokyo Games, centered around the athletes. They are Olympic the ones that are on the center stage. Events at large. In general, the games centered around the athletes every 4 years are the ones that are on the center stage, and the games take place every 4 years. Sport events and athletes have been dedicating their efforts to be part of those games. There are various sport events has a strong message in conjunction with education to be part of those games. For athletes and athletes, that has a strong message in conjunction with education. Would be left as a legacy as Olympic and Paralympic Games and therefore together with the athletes would be left as a legacy. I realize as the Tokyo Games and Paralympic Games and therefore together with the athletes holding the Tokyo Games. In the process of the Tokyo Games, participating with them, the games. So this is not just holding the Tokyo Games. Series of issues and challenges. In the process of aiming at participating the games resolved with the capacity of Tokyo. There are series of issues and challenges to the rest of the world. And then there are those athletes with the capacity of Tokyo would be proud of being part of the rest of the world. And then so we want to make those athletes at the center stage would be proud of participating part of the games can take pride of, and that's something that I'd like to realize that the participating athletes can take pride of, and that's something that I'd like to realize. If I may add, as I am selected if I may as the president of the organizing committee, and that was reported to President Back as the president IOC, and he was the organizing committee for the selection, and that was reported to as President Back the athletes IOC, and he was very experienced together with the selection as minister. I should take advantage of such experiences, and that he's willing to what I experienced together with experience as minister. I should take advantage of such experiences, and that he's willing to work through strong partnership. That was quite encouraging with us in supporting myself and that's what we have conversed with Mr. Bach. That was quite encouraging. I have known him for many years with Mr. Bach over the telephone. I'm going to interact with him as a partner. I have known him for many years in my new capacity as the president of the organizing committee. I'm going to interact with him as a partner. A strong sense of tension and determination. My new capacity as the president of the organizing committee. And I now message that was conveyed to me of tension and determination. I'm once again looking upon myself trying to fulfill what was expected by him. Thank you very much. Once again looking upon myself trying to I'm sorry, due to time shortage, we could not entertain all the questions from the audience. Thank you very much for your interest. I'm sorry, due to time shortage, we could not entertain all the questions from the audience, but thank you very much for your interest. To those of you who are participating the next round of press conference, please stay connected. To those of you who are participating the next round of press conference, please stay connected.
So as already we communicated through emails, we are now distributing on paper basis materials about the process and the discussion of the candidate selection committee. while we are waiting for our speakers to arrive, once again for today, thank you very much for your cooperation and understanding about the tough rules about your reporting activities, and also some arrangements were changed at the last minute, so please accept our apologies about them. Thank you. Now, we would like to continue with our press conference. I would like to introduce our speakers, Mr. Mitarai Fujio, Chairperson of the Candidate Selection Committee, and Mr. Muto Toshiro, CEO of Tokyo 2020 from Part 1 as well. Mr. Mitarai, if you could please say a few words. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. I am Mitarai. A while ago, earlier today, the press conference given by new president of 2020, Ms. Hashimoto, I was viewing that press conference on television, and there was a lot of content, and the rich contents they were, and the facts are more eloquent than anyone who speaks. So I think there is not much left to me to say and speak about. That was my feeling. But basically, as the chairperson of the selection committee, I would like to share with you the process and the results of the candidate selection committee evaluation. We had an executive board as well as council joint meeting on the 12th of February. We said that it was an urgent matter to select a new president upon resignation wished by Mr. Mori. Therefore, quickly candidate selection committee was set up, and I was appointed chairperson of that committee. In terms of membership of the candidate selection committee, gender equality in terms of the number of members was one criteria, and also from national government, and also amongst the 35 members of the executive board, we selected 8 persons, including myself, who are relating to national government or Tokyo Metropolitan Government and other related stakeholder organizations. And the list of the members of the candidate selection committee, I believe, has already been shared with you. And the first meeting of the candidate selection committee meeting was held on Tuesday, 16th of February. And then we discussed about the appropriate profile of the new president. That was the topic of the discussion in that first meeting. And 5 criteria were identified and I believe that you have already the list of these 5 criteria. And on the next day, Wednesday, 17th of February, the second meeting of the candidate selection committee was held. In this second meeting, candidates who were deemed being suitable for the position of the president were discussed and evaluated. And discussion was conducted about in order to identify the person who meets the 5 criteria. And as a basis of that discussion, from all the members of the committee, more than one person was requested to be recommended by each of the members of the candidate selection committee. And as for this recommendation, of course, candidates can be someone who is existing member of the executive board, and since there is one vacancy due to the resignation of Mr. Mori, someone who was not an existing member of the executive board was also acceptable for this recommendation. So based on the suitability for the position of the president of the Tokyo 2020, based on the 5 criteria. In this process of discussion, a certain number of persons were recommended, and we had a thorough discussion about them. I would like to share with you some of the highlights of this discussion. All of the candidates who were mentioned were wonderful persons. Therefore, from the viewpoint of each of these 5 criteria, overall, they were all wonderful, but each of them had some relative strong points or some relative weakness. That was one of the aspects of our discussion. And also, for the new president to be accepted by all the people, including all the population of Japan, comprehensiveness of meeting the criteria was essential. That was part of the opinions expressed by committee members. However, full score person meeting fully all of the 5 criteria, it's something we cannot find as a living person. Therefore, we said that we will be able to support that person with some relative weakness, and so that we will be able to aim for the success of the games. That was also mentioned in the discussion. And also with the national government and with IOC and IPC, it is very essential to have a good coordination for the success of the Games. So that is one of the particularly required capabilities and skills for the new president. It was mentioned as well. And these 5 criteria, well, there are numbers from 1 through 5. However, it is not in the order of priority at all. They are all equally important, all 5 of them. However, having said that, international renown and international sense are much depending on personality. So we said that this really needs to be required to be fully held and delivered as a personal skill and capability by the president himself or herself, even if we said that we can support them. So, and also accepting the position of becoming a president of Tokyo 2020 during this pandemic is very challenging for anyone. Therefore, of course, the candidates selection committee members, but also all the executive board members will need to fully support the new president. That was also one of the opinions expressed in our discussion. So in this at random way, I highlighted some of the opinions expressed in our discussion in the committee. And on that day, Wednesday, 17th of February, we exceeded significantly the scheduled time for our meeting with this discussion. And as a final result, with unanimity, Ms. Hashimoto Seiko was decided to be the most suitable person for the president of Tokyo 2020. Of course, the selection and the decision of, for the appointment of the president of Tokyo 2020 is a matter within the terms of reference of the executive board. So executive board's agreement was, of course, the preconditions, and that was already cleared. At the same time, at the executive board, even if the executive board wishes to make this offer to that person, if the person does not wish to accept it, it does not happen for that person to become the president, of course. So we said that provided that the executive board wishes to make the offer for the presidency position to this person, when that condition was met, I personally contacted Ms. Hashimoto as an informal communication about this offer which was to be made. At that time, Ms. Hashimoto did not give me any immediate answer, but after deliberation yesterday in the late evening about our conversation, Ms. Hashimoto seriously deliberated. And already during our conversation, I felt that she was positively considering our offer, but of course, during that phone call and our conversation, she did not give me immediate answer. Ms. Hashimoto herself, I believe, wondered if she was capable enough to fulfill this very important role of President of Tokyo 2020, and more importantly, her current position then was a very important ministerial position. So I believe that she wondered if it was appropriate for her to leave the ministerial position. So no immediate answer, as I said, and I imagine she consulted with the stakeholders, and then Shortly after noon today, we received an answer from Ms. Hashimoto saying that if Executive Board agrees for the success of the Olympic and Paralympics Games, Ms. Hashimoto clearly said that she will be willing to accept that offer.
Now, based upon that response, we met on the third occasion as the selection committee, reporting to the members that she was willing to accept the offer. Then, we confirmed that the candidate selection committee unanimously supports the nomination of Ms. Hashimoto to be reported to the executive board meeting. Then it was reported to the board meeting, and as was recommended by the selection committee, a board meeting first nominated her as the member of the executive board, because there is the procedure according to which the president of the organizing committee is to be selected out of the members of the board. Thus, request was made to make her a member of the board, and therefore the council meeting met, and she was formally selected as the member of the executive board. I'm sorry, this is quite complicated, but then the board met once again and agreed on selection of Ms. Hashimoto as the president. I would say this was quite a transparent process, that we selected Ms. Hashimoto as the president of the organizing committee. The reason why she's qualified as the president, that is already explained in the document that is distributed to you. And if you also take a look at her, the background, the profile, I'm sure you are also in agreement with our decision. And in fact, that she used to be the member of the board, and she is a former athlete. She experienced both summer and winter games. Thus, as the reason for selection, for those 5 criteria or 5 qualities that we have identified, I am confident in stating that she meets those qualities. And once again, I'd like to repeat that it was a unanimous agreement by the selection committee in making a recommendation to the board. And then Ms. Hashimoto agreed on accepting the nomination, and thus it was reported to the board, and then she was formally selected as a president and gave a speech of assuming the post as a president. That's all about the outline of the selection committee deliberation. I think we started the 15 or 20 minutes later than the original schedule, and therefore we'd like to extend the session as such. Mr. Harada of Tokyo Shimbun. Harada of Tokyo Shimbun speaking. On the second day of the selection committee, the candidate was selected. But I'd like to know how many candidates were identified by the members of the selection committee, and if you can tell us the names of those candidates. And you mentioned you deliberated for 1 hour and 30 minutes. Are you really sure that you exhausted discussion? It appears to me that this was a conclusion already made before starting the discussion. there were 9 candidates that were selected. Some of them are the members of the board, some of them are not. You asked for the names of those candidates. Well, according to the 5 qualities, 8 members of the candidate selection committee identified them. Therefore, those candidates did not come to the fore as the president candidates, and therefore, I wonder whether they are willing to disclose their identity. I don't want to give any kind of negative the implication and negative impact to that could be placed on the some other candidates, not to overshadow the selection of Ms. Hashimoto. You mentioned 90 minutes are rather short, but actually we spend more time in discussing those 5 qualities. Now that we have identified the 5 qualities as solidly established criteria, and in fact, most of us, if not all, came to agree on Ms. Hashimoto. More specifically, 7 out of 8 members. Because I served as a chair, I'm not included, but I would say out of 6 members, the 6 members out of the 7, many of them proposed Ms. Hashimoto. There were some who did not nominate her because she read on the newspaper or on the reporting that she may be unwilling to accept the offer. She might decline. So that's why some people assumed that she would not be accepting the offer. That's why her name was not nominated. But then we turned to each members of the selection committee asking what they would expect. So I would say that although we spent only 1 hour and a half, the discussion was quite efficient and productive. And listening to each member's remarks, especially former athletes, they were quite enthusiastic and full of passion and praising her. We had a very heated and productive discussion, I would say. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the person on the second row from the front, please. Thank you very much. Okada from Weekly Diamond. In the part 1 of our press conference, Ms. Hashimoto said that she had a deep reflection upon the incident of sexual harassment that was mentioned by a reporter, which happened 7 years ago. So what was the discussion happened in the candidate selection committee about that particular incident? Well, there was no discussion at all about that particular topic. And then Ms. Hashimoto was a minister of a national government. So from the society viewpoint and within the government of Japan, the apologies which were already made by Ms. Hashimoto were fully accepted. There was no subsequent issue or problem. That was our understanding. So there was no question or discussion at all about it in our candidate selection committee. Thank you very much. Kurasawa-san, please.
Kurasawa of Mainichi newspaper. Mr. Mitarai, about discussion, you mentioned there were 9 candidates. What kind of process did you go through in finally coming down to Ms. Hashimoto? So the 9 people were selected, and then you went through the process of boiling down or narrowing the list, or from the outset, it was determined that Ms. Hashimoto being selected. And also you mentioned about ensuring transparency. Have you considered inviting experts from outside of the organization. Well, in case of emergency, a solution is urgently required. Even a single day counts. Otherwise, we cannot go through coming 5 months if we are to invite outside experts. So actually, we didn't have luxury of time in inviting outside experts. But in organizing the Tokyo Games, the candidates referred to the people that were close to them, or the members of the selection committee referred to people who were close to them. For instance, in the case of Tokyo Metropolitan Government, Vice Governor Tarao was there. And from the JOC or IOC related, Mr. Yamashita was there. And then Mr. Murafushi represented the government. So 9 athletes, those athletes were there to look at this issue from athlete first point of view. If there are too many members, then discussion may not be conclusive, and we didn't have a luxury time inviting outside experts. It may sound like a complacency, but I believe those 8 people were sufficient and essential in fulfilling the requirement for making such a decision. And 9 people were nominated as candidates. Then we listened to the reason for nomination for each one of them. But as I said, there were some multiple people that recommended Ms. Hashimoto. So after the first round of nomination, and then our discussion tended to focus on Ms. Hashimoto.
Thank you very much. How many people still have questions in this press conference room? Miss from Daily Sport. Thank you very much. My question for Mr. Mitarai. Amongst the executive board members, some of them said that it was perhaps better for the candidate selection committee to nominate 2 or 3, more than 1 candidate, so that the executive board will narrow down to 1 single candidate to decide the new president. And what's the reason why this process was not taken? Well, if we had more time amongst the 35 executive board members, we could have perhaps asked for voluntary candidature to have discussion. That could have been one way of doing it. But if we had done so, it would have been a lot of discussion, and then without certainty for the person who is nominated to accept the offer. So confusion was easily expected and easy to imagine with that type of process. So on behalf of those 35 executive board members, these 8 members were selected for direct and indirect relevance and relationships as the candidate selection committee members. I think from the viewpoint of efficiency, that was a good way. And in terms of openness and transparency, as you know, well, final decision is up to the executive board. And all the executive board members have an opportunity and chance to say anything if they wish to do so. And the decision, once again, is up to the executive board. And after all these processes, and with the publication of the name of the members of the candidate selection committee, I believe that in terms of transparency, and from the viewpoint of the IOC as well, there was no deficiency in terms of transparency. Thank you.
The person in the front row, please. Rueda from Weekly Asahi. Earlier, you said you called Ms. Hashimoto yesterday, but she did not respond on the spot. You mentioned that she was wondering whether she should really resign as a minister. Do you think there were other reasons behind her reluctance? And no, I don't think she referred to any other reasons. Because she thought she had to talk with the prime minister who nominated her as a minister. She can't just leave the government at her own will, and that is the major reason I thought behind her attitude in not answering immediately to a request. Ever since the time of the committee inviting the Tokyo Games, she has been involved, and therefore she knew all the difficulties, and therefore, as she also stated, she thought enormous task that was on her when she became the president, and that may be the reason. She probably consulted with other people, and finally she came up to the decision, and she returned her call to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, the person on the front row, and also Saito-san who raised a hand earlier, and that will be the last question. Thank you very much. Arahane from Sankei Shimbun newspaper. Earlier today, in the candidate selection committee, you said that some people were really passionately recommend Ms. Hashimoto. Well, reading the documents and the materials distributed to you, we cannot feel that atmosphere. So if you could please elaborate on. You said that no candidate had a full score, but then as executive board, and then who believes that it is very worthwhile to support Ms. Hashimoto. What is the aspect of Ms. Hashimoto which are worthwhile to be supported? Well, I said that some discussion was really passionate, and but there was not much deep meaning that I put into that. I just wanted to share some of the mood. And unfortunately, I have to say, in relation to your question, that the executive board meeting was closed door, and if he had opened the door, public, you could been able to see. Ms. Hashimoto was 7 times Olympian, and also the chief of the delegation for 3 Olympic Games, and had a lot of experiences of international games and competition, and many international experiences and renown. And she started her career as athlete, and she became a national minister. So she's really a big person for all the athletes. And that person was nominated as the candidate. So there was a big joy and pleasure expressed. And today as well, during the press conference, it was mentioned. Therefore, very enthusiastic expression was made for recommendation of Ms. Hashimoto. And I understand that you were not attending the executive board meeting, of course, but please read the biography of Ms. Hashimoto. If you read it, you can see that it is obvious that the 5 criterion are really the full perfect match with her profile, and you may imagine that perhaps the 5 criterion were defined based on how Ms. Hashimoto is, but it's not the case.
Saito of Asahi newspaper. This is something more about details for qualification. You made a request yesterday. What time did you make that request, and did you meet with her in person, or did you call her? And I believe the selection subcommittee met this morning as well. I'd like to know when she conveyed her intention to accept the offer. What was the timing of confirming her acceptance? First, I made a call. I think there was a budget committee. I was waiting until that discussion ends there. And I think Ms. Hashimoto had some work to do. And so I think that could be around 6 o'clock or maybe a little bit before 6 o'clock. We finally made a call. The call was made through to her, and then I explained. And when was that we received the call? Yeah, I think we were behind the schedule. I think it was around 12:30. Was about the time that I was eating a sandwich. That's when I received the call. Does it answer your question then? This is going to be the last question.
So a question from online participant. For this selection of the new president, including the consideration of the process and reason why Mr. Mori resigned, was that deliberately intentional to select a female person, a woman? Well, when we discussed about Ms. Hashimoto, we didn't really focus on her being a woman. The personality, who this person is essential for us. And we looked at her career and experiences, and I have been already highly evaluating Ms. Hashimoto as a person as well as a statesman in the political community. So not at all for the reason of her being a woman. Thank you very much. This is the end of this press conference. Thank you very much for staying us until late night. Thank you. Sorry that my voice, I had a sore throat, so my voice was perhaps not clear always. Thank you very much anyway for your attention. Some announcements for the reporters who are in this room. This room is available for 30 minutes and the X-Wing will be closed at 7:30 p.m. as announced previously. So if you have some items left in